Today's story is of Ghost Flight 401, the story 5 decades old. This story begins on December 1971. That is Flight 401, had to go from New York to Florida. In flight, there were 180 passengers on board. All of them boarded from New York and to reach Florida. Everything was normal after takeoff. The plane was running as per its own speed. After a while, all the air hostesses got up and started preparing for breakfast and other things. One of these air hostesses was named Meriwether. So Meriwether got up to do her work and went to the back of the plane where the food, water, lunch, everything is kept there. Now she had to keep them in the trolley and serve with her friend. But as soon as she reaches the back and gets close to the oven, she was shocked. She sees a face on the glass of the oven. The front portion was made of glass. It looked like the TV screen of the oven. Meriwether got scared and moves back. After a while, she feels that she was mistaken, and she moves forward again to heat the food. But as soon as she moves back, suddenly a face appears again on the screen. Now, air hostess gets really scared. She moves away from there and reaches to the person sitting closest to her. He was an engineer on that flight. Now Mary told him the whole story. How she was taking out the food, but suddenly a face appears on the screen of the oven and then disappears, and she had seen it twice. Engineer felt strange and then laughed. After that, he goes to the food store to check where the oven was kept. When he reaches there and goes near the oven, suddenly the face rises again. It seemed like the face wanted to say something. First the engineer got scared, but then he listens carefully and bravely to what actually face wanted to convey message. The reason was that the engineer recognized the face of the flying plane. It recognized that it was not someone else but an ex-employee of this airline who was no longer in this world, but another flight engineer, Don Repo. The face of Don Repo is seen on the glass of the oven, and they got scared. But he listens to them do what he says. So Don Repo, the former flight engineer, suddenly tells them to be careful. There is a fire in the jet. After saying this, the face disappears from the oven. Now both engineer and air hostess Mary get scared, but Don Repo thinks that this is a delusion. He doesn't believe in ghosts and spirits, but he recognized that he is an old engineer. When all this was happening, the flight duration was not long, and the flight was on time. Suddenly, flight got delayed, and the passengers were sent to another plane. And now the other things of this flight, they started checking. The investigation was completed. Before flying the passengers, the flight engineer was asked to take a trial flight. There would be no problem in the air. The passengers' lives would be in danger. The flight engineer who was there, he had given an arc for flight to take off again. But prior to it, he was asked to take a trial flight. After that, the plane would be flown. But when flown, suddenly the engine caught fire in the middle of the sky. There was mid-air explosion. The plane crashed. But with God's grace, there were no passengers on board. There were only engineers and pilots. Coincidentally, at the airport, the flight engineers and air hostess, Mary saw this horrific scene with their own eyes. They remembered everything. How face wanted to convey to them that the jet was about to catch fire. And that's what happened, although no one believed in paranormal activities. But then they found out about the story of an engineer, Don Repo, and now the whole story is revealed. But what's the matter? Now, after a year, another flight took off from the same airport. The crew members, engineer, pilot, and air hostess were all in total. The plane flew from New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport to Miami, Florida. The captain of this flight was a 55-year-old Robin Bob. He was very senior, and he had 30,000 hours of flight experience. He was considered to be quite a man. This flight flew from New York to Miami. It was flying above the landing gear, and it had to land after some time. But the pilot suddenly felt that when he lowered the landing gear, the signal was not coming. After that, they went down and checked it. They found out that there was a problem with the landing gear. Then they spoke to the ATC and asked what to do because there was a problem with the landing gear. But now the plane was coming down fast near the Chuk airport. Landing gear was not opening. there was a technical problem, and the plane could not be landed. And this plane, after a short while, it crashed before the Miami airport. After the crash, 69 passengers and crew members were killed after the crash. Now the investigation began. Half of the passengers were saved, half died. The whole investigation was done when the plane was down. Many parts of the plane were damaged, but many parts of the plane were safe. This was the plane of Eastern Airlines Company. The engineer investigated all the parts. And then, after this accident, 1 year later, the engineer's face was shown on the glass of the oven. Actually, in that flight, Don Repo was flight engineer, and he died in this crash. Don Repo and his pilots died. But many parts of this plane were used in other planes. And that was the same Eastern Airlines Company plane in which 1 year after the incident happened. And Don Repo warned that the jet engine could catch fire. Be careful. And the plane landed, and there was a technical problem. And after that, it caught fire in the middle of the sky. The plane crashed. After this, many talks were held. That was the reason why an engineer who had died from the crash plane came to the other plane and warned them. But regarding this, a lot of investigation was done, and 2 educated engineers were also interviewed. An air hostess saw it with her own eyes. They told us that it will happen, and the same thing happened. It was thoroughly investigated. That is why it is named Flight 401 Ghost. So these were 2 stories of planes that connect with each other. I don't know how much truth, reality, and story is in this. But yes, all these things are in the records. It's been almost 72 years now. But this mystery is still a mystery.